In a quiet suburban neighborhood, the rules of the Homeowners Association were written like gospel. Every lawn had to be trimmed the same length, every mailbox painted the same dull shade of gray, and every resident expected to follow a list of endless restrictions. But when Marcus, a hardworking black homeowner, moved into the neighborhood, he wanted one thing above all else: peace for his family. Years before, Marcus had installed a modest pool in his backyard. It wasn't flashy or oversized, just a place for his children to play and for him to relax after long shifts. But time had worn it down. The lining had cracked, the filters were constantly breaking, and maintenance costs climbed higher each month. Marcus made a practical decision. He would take down the pool entirely. He figured the HOA would be relieved. After all, removing it would make his yard neater, simpler, and easier on the eyes. But he underestimated just how eager the HOA was to control every detail of his property. The day he dismantled the pool, neighbors peeked over fences, whispering as if some great scandal had unfolded. And among them was a woman who prided herself on being the HOA's self-proclaimed watchdog, a woman the neighborhood knew only as Karen. Marcus thought it was his choice to remove something he had paid for, maintained, and owned. But Karen saw it as defiance. To her, it wasn't just a pool being torn down. It was a challenge to her authority. And that quiet afternoon, as Marcus cleared away the last of the debris, he noticed her staring at him from across the street, arms crossed, phone in hand. He didn't know it yet, but the battle was only beginning. The very next morning, Marcus received an envelope taped to his front door. Inside was a sternly worded letter from the HOA, claiming he had violated the neighborhood aesthetic by dismantling his pool without proper approval. Marcus was stunned. Approval? To remove something he had purchased with his own money? It made no sense. The letter threatened fines and possible legal escalation. Marcus set it aside, thinking it was a mistake. Surely, the HOA wouldn't care about him getting rid of an old pool that was falling apart. But Karen cared. She cared more than anyone should. Karen marched from house to house, stirring up neighbors with her usual dramatics. She claimed Marcus's removal of the pool was bringing down property values and setting a dangerous precedent. For Karen, this wasn't about community standards. It was about control, and she wanted everyone to know she was the one enforcing it. Soon, whispers spread. Neighbors who had once waved politely now watched him suspiciously. The HOA sent another notice, this one larger and angrier than the last, threatening legal action if Marcus didn't restore the pool to its original state. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. They wanted him to put the pool back, even though it was unsafe, expensive, and unwanted. But Karen wasn't done yet. She escalated further, filing a formal complaint and pushing the HOA board to take immediate action. And when Marcus didn't comply quickly enough, she took her vendetta to the next level. Because for Karen, letters and threats weren't enough. She was about to bring in someone with more power, someone Marcus never expected to see on his doorstep. It was a Saturday afternoon when the patrol car rolled slowly down Marcus's street. The flashing lights reflected against the windows of tidy homes, drawing curious faces to porches and lawns. Neighbors gathered, whispering, as if they were about to witness a crime unfold. But there was no crime. Only Marcus, standing in his yard, surprised to see two officers approaching his property. Karen, of course, stood across the street, phone clutched tightly in her hand, watching with smug satisfaction. The officers explained that a complaint had been filed by the HOA, claiming Marcus had violated community rules and was causing a disturbance. The words sounded absurd, even to them, but protocol required that they respond. To Karen, however, this was victory. She had summoned the police to put Marcus in his place. Marcus remained calm, though inside he was boiling. He had worked his whole life to provide stability and dignity for his family. And now, in front of his children and neighbors, he was being treated like a criminal over a swimming pool he had chosen to remove from his own backyard. The officers walked through the property, confused about why they had been called in the first place. There was no damage to the community, no disruption, no crime. But Karen shouted from across the street, insisting Marcus was breaking the rules and hurting the neighborhood. The officers left after issuing no citation, clearly aware of how petty the situation was. But the damage was done. Marcus's children had seen it all: the flashing lights, the tension, the humiliation. And as Karen smirked in triumph, Marcus knew one thing for certain: this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. That night, Marcus sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by HOA letters and notices. The humiliation of the police visit replayed in his mind, but instead of anger consuming him, a fire of determination began to grow. He would not allow Karen, or the HOA she manipulated, to control his life. Marcus began researching HOA laws, digging through county regulations and homeowners' rights. To his relief, he discovered something critical. No law required a homeowner to maintain or reinstall a pool once it was voluntarily removed. The HOA could set community guidelines, but they could not force a resident to rebuild something that had been lawfully dismantled. Armed with evidence, Marcus drafted a formal response. He sent letters not only to the HOA board but also to the county housing authority, outlining the harassment he faced. He documented everything: the notices, Karen's behavior, and even the unnecessary police visit. Neighbors who once stayed silent began to notice the unfairness. Some quietly approached Marcus, admitting they too had been harassed by Karen for trivial issues. The tide of opinion began to shift. When the HOA board called a meeting to discuss Marcus's violation, he arrived prepared. He calmly presented his case, citing legal precedent and exposing Karen's personal vendetta. The room fell silent as he laid out every detail, each fact cutting through the lies Karen had spread. Karen sputtered with indignation, but the board couldn't ignore the truth. Marcus wasn't in violation. In fact, it was the HOA and Karen herself that risked legal trouble for harassment. But Karen was not someone who surrendered easily. Defeated at the meeting, she left the room with a chilling glare. Marcus had won this round, but the battle was reaching its climax. Weeks later, a letter arrived in Marcus's mailbox. But this time, it wasn't another threat. It was an apology. After reviewing his case and the legal risks, the HOA officially withdrew all complaints. The board even admitted the police should never have been called. Marcus had prevailed, but not without scars. His children had seen how quickly suspicion could fall on their family, how one person's prejudice could turn peace into chaos. Yet they also saw their father's strength, his refusal to be intimidated, and his ability to fight back with dignity. As for Karen, her influence began to crumble. Neighbors grew tired of her constant meddling, and whispers of a petition to remove her from the HOA board started circulating. The power she had clung to for years slipped away, not because Marcus shouted louder, but because he stood taller. Marcus rebuilt his backyard, not with another pool, but with a garden that his family could enjoy together. Every flower, every fresh blade of grass, stood as a reminder that his property was his own. In the end, Karen's attempt to control him backfired. The HOA had been forced to admit their overreach, and Marcus had shown everyone that strength isn't about aggression. It's about resilience. The flashing police lights, the fines, the threats, all of it faded into memory. What remained was a lesson for the entire neighborhood. No homeowner should have to live in fear of their own community. And for Marcus, the victory was more than personal. It was proof that dignity, when defended, can outshine even the loudest voices of control.